Hello and welcome back to the Ghost of Alcantra. So, the third murder happened in the 87 timeline. Despite that, the last episode was mostly very romantic, but I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop on that whole Thorn family, Alexandria situation, so let's see. July 24th, 1987. I spent the day trying to avoid my parents, since I doubted I could hide my excitement about Alexandria being free tomorrow. I was very happy, but there was a part of me that felt tonight would be a little bittersweet. I was the only one privy to both sides of her life, and that would end after tonight. It was for the best, but I'd always look back on these past 2 months fondly. I was still a little worried about this deal Alexandria had made, but as long as Alexandria herself wasn't involved with the murders, I wouldn't think too much of it. I trusted her. Around 11:40, I made my usual escape and headed toward our meeting spot. The weather was great, and it would be a special evening for us. I emerged from the woods and into the clearing about 5 minutes early, getting a great view of the stars, but not of Alexandria. She wasn't here yet. That made me a little nervous. The only other time Alexandria hadn't arrived before me was the time she couldn't make it because her family had reinstated her house arrest. Arriving and not seeing her was bringing back bad memories. I tried to calm myself down. It was still 5 minutes before our meeting time. She wasn't going to be early every time. I parked myself on the edge of the clearing and turned towards the forest, where I'd get a good view of her arriving, and waited. And waited. And waited. 10 minutes passed, which would be nothing to worry about if I was waiting for anybody else than Alexandria. The possibilities were already racing through my mind. Of all the days, it had to be our last one, our last special evening. The night sky was beautiful. The stars were shining. There was a calm breeze blowing. It was a beautiful night. Far too beautiful a night for Alexandria to not be here. An hour passed, and she still didn't show up. The night continued its beautiful elegy for our secret tryst. I decided I had enough sitting and waiting. I already had experience with this. Alexandria simply did not show up late. Alexandria did simply not show up late. There had to be something wrong. I ran from the clearing through the trees towards the spot Alexandria and I had hidden her telescope. Yesterday I was bothered that we were leaving such an expensive piece of equipment out in the elements, but now I was glad that it would give me any indication of Alexandria's activity. The tree we had picked was about 10 minutes from our meeting spot. I found the tree, removed some leaves and branches we had used to cover the bag, and sure enough, there was the telescope. She hadn't retrieved it yet. That didn't mean anything by itself, but it still increased my anxiety. I ran back to our usual spot in the clearing. Alexandria still wasn't there. My heart was now frantically pounding, and not just from the run. I sat down and tried to calm myself. I considered the possibilities of why she hadn't shown up, and I could only think of one realistic one. Alexandria must have been caught sneaking out. Why had we continued to meet after she told me about the deal with her father? That was so stupid of us. Agreed. Feelings of love or not, we jeopardized our future by doing that. Sure, we would have lost some magic between us, especially last night, but we would have had our whole futures ahead of us still. There would be other nights. There was always a possibility that something hadn't gone wrong, but I knew that was too idealistic to consider. It was unlikely there was a benign reason for her absence given her family. Supposing Alexandria was caught, what would happen to her? I had no idea. I would have to find a plausible way to inquire about Alexandria without revealing that she told me who she is. That ruled out storming the Thorn mansion and making a scene. I could come up with a story. I could say that my uncle had figured it out based on his ongoing investigation. It was plausible enough to think he could have considered it if he followed the lead of Alga Thorne murdering his wife. Girls don't just pop out of nowhere. Alexandria would have had to come from somewhere, and it's possible you might figure out she was a Thorne. Yeah, I could say something like that. Alexandria never told me, but my family had figured it out. I was worried about her because we were meeting, so I came to check on her. I could say that I forced her to do it, that I threatened to tell all of Alcantra she was the daughter of the Thorns if she didn't meet with me. That might work. Really? If the Thorns wouldn't let me see her, I would spill the whole story to my parents and Uncle Kyle. He'd get... well, I don't know what he could get, but he'd do something. I know he would. Someone would have to do something, and I could prove that Alexandria existed as a Thorn. There was the telescope, which had her name engraved on it. We had jokingly talked about me saving her from the Thorn mansion before. Well, I couldn't do it heroically, but I was going to try. If you're locked up in there, Alexandria, I'll do my best to get you out of there, I promise. If everything is all right, I don't mind looking like a fool. It wasn't quite dawn yet. I knew the staff of the Thorns started waking up a little after dawn for work, so I could guarantee someone would notice me then. Until then, I figured I could try and sniff out the secret passage that the Thorns used. That's kinda risky. I get that he's worried, but yeah, there is also a high chance that she was just caught or for whatever reason couldn't come this one evening, so maybe waiting at least a day would be smarter. That was what Alexandria had been using initially when she first had her freedom, though I guess she had a different escape route when she snuck out at night. I imagined they locked her in her room, so she had to go out of the window somehow. How had you managed that? I explored the surrounding hills and forests of the Thorn mansion, but I couldn't find anything that resembled a secret passage. It wouldn't be a secret passage if it was easy to find, and plus I have no idea if it even came out close to the Thorn mansion. For all I knew, Alcantra had a whole tunnel system underneath, and the passage led to somewhere much closer to town. I checked my watch. It was after 5 now. Dawn was about to break, and soon the sun would be up. I was worried, but resolved. No more playing games. I was finally going to confront the Thorns. And if that didn't work, I was running to a detective. Either way, we're getting you out of there, Alexandria. July 25th, 1987. Oh boy, we're really going to do this? Okay. I ran towards the front gate of the Thorn mansion as fast as I could, with my half-assed plan in mind. The Thorn mansion sits on a hill, a menacing building with an old-fashioned gate to its front and a dramatic cliffside behind it. In front of the gate there are 2 paths. One went down the hill, the other went further up it. I paused when I reached the front of the gate. Something had happened here. I approached the gate cautiously. As I approached, my heart started pounding harder and harder, a harbinger of panic that was beginning to take hold of me, because as I got closer, it became more and more obvious what had happened. There had been some sort of conflict here, a violent conflict. If it wasn't obvious by the army of embedded footsteps or the trampled garden bed, then it was obvious by the large splatter of blood. Someone had been trying to escape from the mansion. My heart continued its assault while I stared at the blood. There was a large spattering right at the gate, and then, as if that splatter was just a tease of what was to come, there lay a trail of blood going down the left path, the path that led down the hill. Fearing the worst, I followed the trail of blood down the slope. And I followed, and followed. The breadcrumb trail of blood. My heart continued to pound. The wind began to pick up. I continued down the descending trail. Someone had to be at the bottom of this trail. I could only do my best to prepare myself while fear consumed me. I continued on the path, quickening my pace. I followed. And I followed. The beckoning from the trail of blood. At the bottom of the trail, I saw a small figure lying in a shaded circular clearing. I slowed down, terrified of discovering the truth of this trail of blood. I continued walking. I slowly approached. The shade grew oppressively darker, and as I got closer, I could tell that the person was a girl. Oh no. Oh no. No, 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 no. She had blonde hair. It can't be. No, please. Please, 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 please. Alexandria. Please, please still be alive. Don't leave me, Alexandria. No! The only bit of mercy from that day was that I could never fully remember what I felt upon first seeing her body. The world closed in on Alexandria's body, and there was nothing but her. There simply were no words that could capture the horribleness of that moment. Unfortunately, that didn't stop me from remembering the rest of the details of that day for my entire life. After discovering Alexandria's body, I rushed to a public phone, called 911, and told the emergency operator that there was an injured girl near the Thorn mansion, and that the person who injured her was either Elgar of Late Thorn, probably Vlade. I begged them to come quickly, knowing full well that no ambulance can come fast enough to save someone who is already dead. I made two big mistakes in the aftermath of Alexandria's death. The first was staying by Alexandria's side as long as possible, taking in every second I had left with her. After the call, I ran back to her body and just looked at her, at the wounds on her body, the expression on her face, the last etched moments of Alexandria Thorn, the girl I loved. Maybe it was the shock, but I couldn't look away. It was the worst thing I had ever seen in my life, and I couldn't look anywhere else. Eventually, the tears came, uncontrollable and violent. The emergency medics found me crying over her body. I begged them to save her, but I knew that if I wanted a miracle, that I should be begging to God instead. She was announced dead at the scene. I already knew she was dead, but hearing it spoken aloud destroyed me all over again. Through my aching sobs, I convinced the medics to let me stay on the scene while we waited for the police to arrive. Given it was my last moments with her, I tried to burn the image of her into my mind, because I would never see her again. That was my mistake. I engraved it too deep. For the rest of my life, I would never forget what she looked like that day. She had 2 large bruises on her face, presumably from being hit. She was wearing the clothes she presumably slept in, a purple nightgown that was in tatters, all over from being ripped by a knife. I counted 8 stab wounds. There were 4 on her right arm, dark gashes that told the story of how she tried to defend herself from the stabbings. The remaining 4 were in her chest, the strikes that probably killed her. Messy blotches of blood surrounded those marks, and I did my best to not cover them in tears. As terrible as the physical wounds on her body were, it was the look on her face that drew into me the most. Her expression was a look of horror, but it almost seemed to me like a look of regret as well. I stared into her vacant eyes, and I could almost hear the "Why, Nick?" that she gave in response to my stare. I knew that look on her face would haunt me for the rest of my life. I could only apologize, knowing that my apologies would never be enough for me or for her. I'm sorry, Alexandria. I'm so sorry. I could only hope that a ghost could hear an apology, because I knew a corpse could not. Damn. Okay, so... that was, I guess... was it, I guess, before? So if you remember back with Victor and his first nightmare, we did see a girl in a nightgown with stab wounds. I don't think I quite made the connection to Alexandria there, but one theory I had, or one of the vague theories on the identity of Victor, was that maybe he could be Nick actually, but it never quite made sense to me. And again, the thing of, okay, that he himself was a murderer, I never quite believed that. That he felt guilt, yes, but he could also feel responsible for someone being murdered without having actually, you know, held the knife himself. So this kind of undermines the maybe Victor is Nick theory, because he saw her and he might have felt guilty, you know, because she was sneaking out to meet him. That kind of thing, that was the guilt. So with him having seen Alexandria like that, that kind of refreshes that that theory that Victor is Nick. But I don't know. It's still kind of... a lot of things didn't add up before, but then again, with how we last left off Victor, and that thing was... yeah, basically him being dead and being punished and whatnot. Maybe it is him. But okay, just had to get that out there, because of, yeah, he saw her like that. Eventually, I was separated from Alexandria, though the damage I had inflicted upon myself had already been done. I was brought to the police station, where I was questioned by Uncle Kyle and several other police officers. Uncle Kyle's face looked like it had been made from stone, but I could tell he was trying his best to keep himself together for the situation. I made no such effort. I sobbed through the whole interview. I told them everything I knew about the situation, including about Alexandria and I. I told them who she was, about our meetings together, and everything she had told me. I tried not to meet Uncle Kyle's eyes when telling him about Alexandria. I had enough trauma for one day. I didn't want to see his disappointment on top of it. I told them that Vlad was probably the murderer if they hadn't already arrested him. I learned then that Alexandria's death was only a part of a much larger event. Not only was she dead, but Elgar Thorne was found dead in a study. 2 of the Thorne staff members were also found dead in a study. The rest of the staff members weren't present in the mansion. And Vlad Thorne, the culprit, had committed suicide by jumping off the cliffs behind the Thorne mansion. He had left a suicide note. The note detailed that he was the culprit for not only the murders of today, but all of the recent murders in Alcantra, with the help of several accomplices. Wow, that's a lot. That also sounds almost too easy, though? That he really was... like all of them? Oh. The news didn't surprise me. If anything, I was relieved when Uncle Kyle didn't mention Alexandria at all in regards to the murders of Marina, Beryl, and Alicia. I was glad to know she had nothing to do with them. Uncle Kyle told me that I had been addressed in the suicide note, but they would decide later if I would be allowed to read it. That briefly roused my attention, but my curiosity quickly died. I didn't care what Vlad had to say about me. That would make me curious. I get that in the moment he doesn't care about that, but that is very curious. Sure, I had met him, but I met the fake version of him. I never met the murderer. The only thing I wanted from Blade was the opportunity for revenge, and I could no longer have that. Even the possibility of that hopelessly misguided idea of justice, a potential bastion of salvation and destruction, was denied to me. I mean, at least he's gone. That's something. Like, I get it. I get that you want, like, proper judgment. But at least he didn't, like, run off. Okay? Yeah. It was much later in the day when I was brought back home. My parents didn't say anything when I returned. They just rushed to me and threw their arms around me. They cried with me. We stood in our doorway mourning together. That evening, I told my parents what I had told the police and Uncle Kyle. When I told them about Alexandria, I told them not just who she was, but who we were together. I told them that I loved her, and that she loved me. That just made my parents cry even harder. I told them I was sorry for sneaking out at night to see her. They wouldn't listen to my apologies, just held me and told me that they were glad that I was okay and that we'd get through this together. I appreciated them more than ever then, but even with their kindness, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to be alright. I was in the period of grieving where happiness and acceptance seemed as far away as sorrow and denial were close. The second big mistake I made came several days later when Uncle Kyle returned with a copy of Blade's suicide note. Since I was addressed in the note, he thought it was only fair that I be able to read it. For closure, he said. I didn't care what Blade had to say, but I figured I might as well know how the murders of Alcantra were committed. My mother objected heavily to my reading it, but eventually she backed off. I should have listened to her. Since that day, I had been harboring thoughts I did my best to repress, thoughts that Alexandria would not have died had it not been for her meeting me, that I was to blame for her death. That look on her face, her asking me why, I could hear her all over again. The letter went as follows. To whomever reads this, consider this suicide note as a sort of public statement. My first and last act as the head of the Thorne family. I, Blade Thorne, take responsibility for the murder and deaths of Marina Raddick, Beryl Johnson, Elisha Raddick, Jackson Mason, Tyler Hill, Elga Thorne, and Alexandria Thorne. Yes, Alexandria Thorne. I'm sure Nick Fox could tell you more about her than I ever could. In case she didn't tell him, Alexandria was Daddy's little secret, his daughter and my sister. Neither Alexandria nor myself are children of Yena Thorne. I do not know who Alexandria's mother is, but my mother is Marina Raddick. I had long suspected that Yena Thorne was not my mother, since she had never treated me like a son, and my father had always treated my existence as a mistake, something he had to put up with, despite my being the heir to the family. Additionally, it was extremely obvious my father had personal ties to Marina, given the money he had sent to her. On the day of the summer festival, I took my favorite knife, Gadyuka, and confronted Marina. I knocked on the door and she let me in. We had a fruitful and enlightening conversation. Unfortunately for her, it was not the sort of fruitful and enlightening conversation I wanted to hear. I apologize for the mess I made. Murder is a messy sort of therapy. Did I kill her because she knew secrets about the Thorns, or because I had mother abandonment problems? Probably both. I was lucky with the murder of Marina. I had picked a time most in the neighborhood would be gone, and was simply lucky that no one saw me enter or leave. I was much more cautious with my subsequent murders. Elisha Raddick was always my next target for two reasons. One, she was Marina Raddick's daughter, and had lived the life I had envied and longed for. Hatred was one reason. The other was cautionary. I had to make sure to get rid of her in case she knew anything about her mother's relationship with my father. However, I would have to be patient. She was being protected by the police. I decided I would wait a bit and then kill Beryl Johnson. I had 2 reasons to kill Beryl Johnson. First, there was the slight possibility she knew that I was Marina Radek's son, given her involvement with Marina's former husband. Secondly, killing Alicia Radek would necessitate using me as a diversion. Thus, I needed the Thorns to look suspicious. So, I used a gun to break into Beryl Johnson's home by shooting the door handle through, and then shot Beryl Johnson. It was very easy, since she lived in an area where I didn't have to worry about witnesses. Of course, people were watching my activities in Alcantra, but she lived way outside of Alcantra. The Thorns utilize a tunnel system for secret movement when needed, which I used to get out of Alcantra unnoticed and make my way to Beryl's home. Killing Alicia would not be so easy. Even when the police stopped protecting her, eyes were on me in Alcantra and would be watchful over her as well. But after I killed Beryl, the focus was hyper-fixated on me, which was what I needed to make the murder of Alicia happen. I introduced 3 of my acquaintances who assisted in the killing of Alicia Radek: Felicia Sturms, who was my in-public girlfriend, Jason Burks, and Bill Wilson. Jason Burks and Bill Wilson work for the event center and had the keys needed to unlock the doors and windows. They were criminals long before I knew them and had accrued quite a debt from gambling fees. I promised to clean their record when I was the head and to pay off their debts. It might be surprising that I am willing to out my girlfriend as an accomplice so easily, but I don't care about her and she doesn't care about me. She had come on to me in an attempt to become part of the Thorn family. I agreed if she assisted with the killing of Alicia Radek. I take no qualms in selling out my accomplices. They perhaps aren't as bad as me, but they are bad people nonetheless. I've already taken innocent people down with me. I may as well be thorough and take down the bad ones as well. My accomplices and I arranged our complicated plot to kill Alicia Radek. The plan was for me to be at the event to distract people and to poison Alicia with a prepared drink so she'd be sick. I just used some rat poison we had at the mansion. Jason Burks put it in one of the glasses and I gave the glass to Alicia at the event. Nick Fox actually saw me do this. We just needed her to be sick enough that it would be easy enough for Bill Wilson to kill her. Bill Wilson kept an eye on the hallway for us while the police paid attention to me. This part was the tricky point. We needed Alicia to enter the hallway and for there to be no witnesses in the hallway. Thankfully, we had some luck. Austin Turnston made quite a scene with his drinking and we were able to pull it off. Alicia needed to go to the bathroom feeling ill from the rat poison, and Bill Wilson corralled her into an empty room. He then broke her neck. Felicia was not at the party to avoid suspicion. She got in through an unlocked window, then screamed to make it sound like Alicia was actively being murdered. We wanted to throw off the autopsy. Eventually they'd figure out she had been poisoned, but if we could delay that verdict long enough, I could make the arrangements to hinder the investigation. I didn't have to do a thing but be there. Neither Bill Wilson or Felicia had alibis, but between Austin and myself, no one paid any attention to them. As long as everyone kept their mouths shut, there was nothing the police could do. You see, this may be my first official act as the Thorn family, but I have been running Alcantra for the last several years. It didn't have to be Bill, Jason or Felicia. I could have chosen any 3. I had no fear that the police could get them to crack. I had much more control over their lives than the police did. The one they feared was me. That brings us to now. I had no intention of killing again. I was satisfied with the deaths of Marina, Beryl and Alicia. The mother I should have had and the child I could have been were both gone. Beryl Johnson was annoying anyway, no one would miss her. No, I was satisfied with their deaths and the secrets of our family being safe with their deaths, but that leads us to Alexandria Thorn. I hope Nicholas Fox reads this one day. As an older brother, I thank you. You brought more joy and smiles into our life in 2 months than anyone else had in 18 years. As the head of the Thorn family, I curse you. Your influence in her life gave her the courage to stand up to our father. She convinced him to destroy the Thorn name. I had given up 23 years of my life for the Thorns, had killed to keep my father's secret safe. And all for naught. Their plan was to send me away, but it was as good as turning me in. I decided to respect their wishes. I destroyed the Thorn family. My father used poor Jackson Mason and Tyler Hill to try and restrain me while he gave me the news. They were unsuccessful. I always keep my knife on me, and I was able to escape their grasps and kill them. I then killed my father, something I really should have done much sooner. And then I killed my sister. Nick will be pleased to know that Alexandria put up a tremendous fight despite being unarmed. She even gouged out one of my eyes, which made writing the suicide note a bitch. After I killed her, I resolved that I would be next. I'm nothing if not thorough. Both of the Thorn children lived their whole lives unfree in their own way. Alexandria was physically and mentally bound to the Thorn mansion. I was shackled as the heir. I think it was the same for my father. In my 23 years of life, I never thought for myself. I lived a life for a role. I could only think of the success of my life in terms of the legacy of the Thorn name. Freedom. I could only envy it, never have it. I think that in these last 2 months, Alexandria was able to find freedom. Perhaps even my father found freedom at the end of his life by reconnecting with his daughter. It is my turn to join them now. At long last, I will finally be free. Blade Thorn. Damn! What a note. Oh man. Did not expect him to, go into all that detail. But okay, so everything clear now, I guess. I read the note, then I read it again. I handed it back to Uncle Kyle while my family observed me cautiously. The details did not particularly interest me. It was just filling in the gaps. The only thing that surprised me was Flade poisoning Alicia in front of me. But my mother was right. I shouldn't have read it. I wordlessly headed up to my room. As an older brother, I thank you. As the head of the Thorn family, I curse you. Those sentences rang in my head. I had been thinking about it all along, since the day I discovered her body, but reading that note made it all the more apparent. Alexandria would not have died had she not met me. She might have been unhappy, but that's better than being stabbed to death. Her death was my fault. I should have told someone, anyone, that Alexandria was a Thorn. I should have been more convincing to Uncle Kyle that the murderer was Vlad, that it had to be. Let's face it, I took advantage of a lonely girl's feelings. I used our situation as a way to bolster our romance, when I should have told everyone I knew that Alexandria was a Thorn. We might not have ended up together, we may not have even been friends. But a promise wasn't worth your life, Alexandria. I'm sorry, so sorry. Her face kept popping up into my mind. That look of horror, her realizing that this is my fault. I knew that rationally I could only be blamed for so much. But every time I thought of her face, the guilt washed over me anew. All I could think of was how sorry I was that I ruined her life. I knew that in the upcoming months I would have friends and family try and reassure me that it wasn't my fault. I had no intention of listening to them. I may not have killed her myself, but my stupidity, my arrogance, my naivety, all should have been listed with the rest of Lade's accomplices. Alexandria had once said that she might end up being the worst thing to ever happen to me, but that I'll always be the best thing to happen to her. Then I remember her face, that look on her face, and I know that wasn't true. I was the worst thing to happen to Alexandria Thorn. I lay down on my bed and cried, thinking of the haunting her ghost had in store for me, desperately hoping that her ghost could deliver the torture I so deserved. August 12th, 1987. The torture I so deserved. Yeah, I think we know what this all is. In the following days, I eventually stopped crying, but I also stopped feeling anything at all. Everyone around treated me like I was fragile, like I might break at any moment, but it was too late for that. I was already broken. My parents consoled me as best they could. They didn't act bright and cheery, they never tried too hard. They just made sure they were around, said they were there to help. They did their best to keep me alive. Walbert and Terence and Jenny all called me frequently to make sure I was doing okay. I knew I was in bad shape when even Terence was trying to reassure me that what happened wasn't my fault, and how much Alexandria must have cared for me. I knew I was being ungrateful and unreasonable, but I didn't want to hear it. Consolations wouldn't bring Alexandria back. I spent most of my time staring up at the ceiling in my room. Alexandria's haunted face stared back. I tried to drown out my thoughts with music. I heard Alexandria's broken voice through my headphones. The only times I felt anything were when I recollected the good times Alexandria and I had together, but I only felt guilt and grief, an overwhelming sadness that the promises we had shared together would forever be unfulfilled. I decided it was better to not feel anything than to feel that pain. The only active thing I did was make sure that I was involved in the funeral arrangements. It would be my last opportunity to say goodbye, and I was hoping that I might get some closure from the ordeal. I had asked Uncle Kyle if he could get me in touch with the people in charge of the funeral. Originally, the plan was that Elgar, Vlade, and Alexandria would share a funeral service. I didn't want Alexandria's life to be celebrated with Vlade and Elgar. Everyone now knew the relationship Alexandria and I had, so no one objected to my proposal to give Alexandria a separate funeral. Some of the Thorn staff members and I were asked to say some words for Alexandria's. I agreed to do so. I tried to come up with a speech, but nothing came to mind. Everything I wrote sounded so hollow, so utterly insufficient in capturing how wonderful Alexandria was and how much she meant to me. I decided that the pre-prepared speech wasn't fitting for Alexandria and I's relationship. I would just say what came to me when the time came. I called up Warburton. He picked up before the first ring even finished.
Hey man, I've been worried. I know you're not alright, but you're not going to be alone through this, you hear? You need anything, you feel anything, you let me know.
I had heard this from everyone recently. I know they meant well, but I could only muster insincerity in response.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a favor?
Sure, anything, dude.
For Alexandria's funeral, could you potentially bring some people you know? Maybe the people who played at the Upa Ball game with us. I don't want her funeral to just be acquaintances of the Thorns. It was only 2 months, but I want there to be some evidence that she left the mansion. I've already gotten permission that people you bring will be allowed to attend. There was silence on the other end. I knew I was disappointed that I hadn't called him to work through my feelings of grief. Everyone was waiting for me to return to the land of the living, but I wasn't ready. Not yet.
Sure thing, Nick. I'll see what I can do.
Thanks. Oh boy. That's a good idea. Making it really about her. About the life she led. Even if it was only that short time, yeah. Man, this is all very depressing. The funeral was on August 12th. It would be the first of three funerals in 3 days. The 2 staff members who had died trying to restrain Vlade would have funerals sometime next week. It went without saying, but I was only attending Alexandria's. Because of how much time had passed since her death, the funeral wouldn't have an open casket. I was relieved. I was already broken, but I would shatter beyond repair if I saw her dead body again. The funeral was held in a church in downtown Alcantra, apparently the church the Thorns had attended when Elga went, though he hadn't gone in quite some time. I had no idea what Alexandria had thought about religion. We had never really talked about it, and now we would never have the chance to. The thought only served to remind me of how short the time we had together was. The attendees of the funeral mostly consisted of older people, presumably business partners and acquaintances of the Thorns. In addition to them were the staff members of the Thorns. I wonder what would happen to them now that the Thorn family was no more. Uncle Kyle informed me that the details of what to do with the Thorns' mansion and inheritance were still being decided. Elga's will had left everything to Alexandria, which threw a wrench in figuring out the inheritance. I hoped that whoever inherited the Thorn fortune would remodel the mansion. I could only see the place as a prison now. Warburton had come through for me. From the crowd, I could see that everyone from the Yupa Ball game was in attendance. He gave me a sad little wave. I raised a hand in response. My parents and Uncle Kyle had come as well. My parents were both sniffling and trying to hold back sobs. I saw lots of people glancing my way. In Alcantra, my legacy would forever be tied to the remembrance of Alexandria Thorn. I would now be known as the guy who had known the mysterious girl locked in the Thorn mansion. The funeral procession started shortly after people settled in. I was one of the pallbearers along with 3 of the former Thorn staff members. The casket was surprisingly light. Alexandria wasn't big, but she had made up for it with her character and attitude. In death, there was nothing to mask how small she was now. After songs and some words from a priest, the Thorn staff members shared some words about Alexandria. They talked about how she was noble and magnanimous, how polite and dignified she was, how Alexandria always did her best in tough circumstances. I had heard enough after the first couple of speeches. These people didn't know Alexandria at all. Polite? Dignified? Their words only captured an echo of what Alexandria was really like. They reflected only the superficiality of her position in the Thorn mansion. There were over 50 people here, but was I the only one who knew what she was like? I was the last to talk. I had to tell the people here of an Alexandria I desperately wanted to have existed, an Alexandria who was more than just a daughter of the Thorns. I stepped up to the dais at the front and looked into the crowd. Public speaking normally made me nervous, but I felt no nerves now. Alexandria would not pass on without people knowing what she was really like. I remembered that was one of her fears. She had feared that the light from her life wouldn't reach anyone. I looked at the expectant crowd. My mom and dad holding back tears, Uncle Kyle stone-faced, Terence looking down awkwardly, and Warburton unabashedly sobbing. I began to speak. Alexandria was a weird girl. I took in the looks of surprise that popped up and continued. She put on fronts, she needed excuses. To ask me to hang out, she told me she would solve a murder. To get closer to me, she made fun of me. She'd call you an idiot or a dummy, then later tell you that you were the best thing to happen to her. But she was also very genuine. When she told you about books, you couldn't help but believe in the power she thought they held. When she showed you the stars, you really thought that they might not be so far away. She was very guarded, but also too trusting. She was very smart, but she wasn't always very logical. She would sneak out at night knowing the dangers of getting caught. She would tell secrets that would put her life in danger. She could tell you what was on line 571 of Crime and Punishment, but she couldn't order a cup of coffee. She could be serious, but she was also silly. She'd pick a sunset for a backdrop to tell you a secret, but she'd also get worked up over a game of Yupa Ball. When she confessed her feelings, she chose to do so under the night sky full of stars. She would tease you about every little thing, always looking for an opportunity to share a smile. Alexandria was a weird girl, full of contradictions, but... My voice had been rising, growing more and more to a fever pitch, but I caught myself. My voice tangled up in my throat. Who did I think I was? I was going on like I was the only one in the world who knew Alexandria, but all I could talk about were my own experiences with her. The Alexandria the Thorn staff knew, the polite and dignified heiress to the Thorn family. Just because I didn't know that Alexandria didn't mean she didn't exist. There was no single real Alexandria, and I had deluded myself into thinking there was. She didn't tell me anything about the deal she made with her father. I didn't know if she was just deducing that Vlad was the murderer, or if she knew that he was and was keeping quiet. She never talked much about what her life was like as a Thorn to me. I thought I could show her the world. All I showed her was a small town. What did I bring to her life? I brought her death. I had gotten it into my head that I knew how she felt, that I had succeeded in bringing out Alexandria's true self. What an egotistical maniac I was. I had no right to talk about Alexandria as if I was the only one who knew her. I had no right to think I was the best thing to happen to Alexandria. All I had to do was think back to that face, that look on her face, and realize that there couldn't be anyone worse to be telling the world about Alexandria than myself. I looked into the crowd. My mother and Warburton were sobbing. There were lots of shaken looks from the staff members. Maybe they were just as shaken hearing about this version of Alexandria as I was from hearing the Alexandria they talked about. I finished my speech, though the person who finished the speech was a different person than the person who started. But I loved each and every one of those contradictions. Her secrets, her truths, her smiles, her frowns. She was a wonderful person, and I will miss her very much. Thank you. I returned to my seat, ignoring the claps, realizing that this funeral wasn't going to bring me closure. It had only revealed that I would never get it with Alexandria gone. Only she could tell me that she would do it all over again, that she was glad I kept her secrets, that she was glad that she met me. Only Alexandria could set me free. Oh boy. It's interesting that he pointed out the things with, okay, yeah, I only have my experiences with her. That doesn't mean I know her true self. But that's the reality. You can never know someone because, or what is it? There was a quote somewhere that we do not see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. Because it is always going to be our personal viewpoints, like how we see things, how we experience people is always going to be completely different from how other people see them and experience them. That's just the thing, there is no one reality because everything is always shaped by your own viewpoint. That's very normal. It's interesting that you realize it in that moment, I understand also. Like it makes sense. Yeah, but that doesn't invalidate what he experienced. And for him, between them, that was Alexandria's true self. So, yeah. After the ceremony, Alexandria's casket was taken to the Thorn family graveyard. The graveyard was next to the Thorn mansion. She was lowered into the earth there. I watched as the casket was covered. There had always been barriers between Alexandria and I. The dirt kept piling on, and eventually she was completely submerged. The last barrier between us was completed. Thorn family member and commoner, life and death. And to add insult to injury, now a pile of dirt separated me from her. People after the ceremony tried to talk to me. Stuff like how touched they were, how glad they were that Alexandria had met me. Nobody told me what I really wanted to hear. Like how what I said was a load of drivel, that I should get off my high horse. Everyone seemed to believe that what I had previously deluded myself with, that I was the only one to know the real Alexandria Thorne. A staff member came up to me as I was about to leave with my parents and Uncle Kyle. She had been crying profusely for most of the funeral, and she continued to do so now. "Thank you, Nick. I'm sorry we never met before, but I just really wanted to say thank you so much for being in Alexandria's life. You don't know how much you meant to her. She was the happiest I ever saw her these last 2 months." Even if that was true, I still would never forgive myself for the role I played in her death. I thanked her, and we made plans to meet up someday to talk about Alexandria. I hoped that whenever that day came, I was more ready than I was now. The staff members I observed seemed to be moving on much better than I was, comforted by the fact that there was somebody she loved in her life. As the lover, I was left with no such comfort. I returned to my family bracing myself for all the kind words I didn't want to hear. It's rough. What are you gonna say about grief? It's gonna be rough. There's not much anyone else can do. Just needs time. When my parents and I returned home, I immediately retreated to my room. The finality of Alexandria's death had hit me. With the funeral, Alexandria was left to become a memory. A funeral was supposed to bring closure, so why was it that I felt like the wounds her death had left me were wider than ever? The prospect of moving on from Alexandria's death right now seemed as unlikely as the prospect of her coming back to life. Even the idea of moving on itself disgusted me. If not me to bear the sadness of her passing, then who? I shouldn't think this way. I shouldn't feel this way. I didn't know everything about Alexandria, but I knew her well enough to know that she wouldn't want me to ruin my life because of her death. She'd want me to move on, to meet other people, fall in love, and be happy. I had thought that only Alexandria could free me, but that wasn't true. Even if she could forgive me, I never could. I'll never forgive myself for keeping her secret. I'll never forgive myself for not insisting she leave the Thorns. I'll never forgive myself for not convincing Uncle Kyle to arrest Vlad. I'll always consider myself to be the one who led her to her death. Our meeting on June 6th, 1987, had been her death sentence. The 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Maybe I was in denial, but certainly not about her death. There's nothing more certain than a corpse. I had skipped bargaining and went straight to depression. And acceptance was impossible for me currently. That left anger. I had felt anger for sure, but it was mostly anger directed at myself. But anger, maybe that could save me. There was still someone that I was angry with. Vlad. I remember the look on his face after Elisha Radek was killed. His smug face that knew there was nothing anyone could do to stop him. And he was right. I had hardly thought about him since reading his suicide note. That was a mistake. I would never forgive him. Revenge was impossible, but still. I grabbed a snow globe off my bedside table. It had been a gift from Uncle Kyle for Christmas a long time ago. It displayed a pretty forest as a penguin ice skated between the trees. I grabbed it, imagining that I had Vlad's life in my hands, his smug look replaced with one of horror and fear. I imagined him pleading for his life, and threw the snow globe as hard as I could at the wall, where it shattered into pieces. Did I feel better? A little. But it wasn't enough yet. Revenge can only be had in broken dreams. I closed my eyes and imagined a scene. I stood facing Vlad on a cliffside. Alexandria's body lay behind me. In my hands I held a small pistol. I had never fired a gun before, but the fantasy of revenge would make a wonderful first time. Alexandria had almost certainly suffered quite a lot before she died. There was her attempt to flee the mansion, a fight at the gates, a run down a hill, 4 stab wounds in her arm, bruises on her face, and 4 stab wounds in her chest. The look on her face, the pain she must have felt. It was horrible to think about, but I made myself imagine her painful last moments as best as I could to rouse my rage. Then I turned to Vlad as he squirmed backwards towards the edge of the cliffs. He had thrown himself off a cliff much like this one. From the height we were at, with the rocks at the bottom, there was no chance he suffered. He would have died instantly. That was far better than he deserved. I raised the gun towards Vlad. I thought of what he had done to ruin Alexandria's life and the lives of countless others, and fired a shot into his left kneecap. I knew the stomach was probably the most painful place to be shot, but the knee would do just fine for a start. There wasn't much blood, which was perfect. Just a bullet through bone, cartilage and nerves. Vlad let out a scream of agony. His handsome features morphed hideously. I smiled, maybe my first smile since Alexandria had died. I raised the gun again and shot his other kneecap. There's no escaping towards the cliffs now, Vlad. He continued to scream. He looked up, begging for mercy. The audacity to beg for his life from me. I thought of Alexandria's 8 stab wounds. No, I wasn't done with you, Vlad. We have 6 more bullets to go. I walked up closer so I wouldn't miss, taking my time, enjoying the tortured expressions on his face, the screams from his lips. I then blasted off each of his thumbs. I wondered if it was possible to stay conscious from this sort of pain, but in my delusions, anything was possible. I smiled at Vlad, trying to reassure him. Halfway done, I laughed the laugh of a broken kid left only with the possibility of torture in his mind to try and feel anything. I continued to stand over Vlad's suffering, but the scene was starting to fade. His screams were quieting, his face was growing less clear. My room started to come back into my vision. That wouldn't do. I needed something to bring me back. I looked around my room for something to break. I grabbed a baseball bat, an old aluminum one I hadn't used since I quit Little League. I grabbed and swung at a lamp on my bedside table. I shattered the bulb, sending the cover of the lamp flying. I reveled in the destruction and closed my eyes again. The cliffside, Alexandria's dead body, and Vlad's tortured form materialized once again. There was no solace in the real world. Maybe I could find closure here. I raised the gun again. I told Vlad to beg for mercy. He begged me for mercy, told me he was sorry, that he would do anything I asked. I shot him in the left shin. I told him to apologize to Alexandria. He apologized. He told me that he would never forgive himself for doing it. I told him I would never forgive him either. I shot him in the right shin. I watched him writhe in uncontrollable pain as the bullet tore through him, sending bone shrapnel through his legs. It was time to wrap this up. I had 2 bullets left. I put the next one into his stomach, the spot I knew would be among the most painful places to be shot. I would let him almost bleed out, and then I would put the final bullet into his brain. I watched Vlad scream and drool in his own blood. No man could bleed that much, but I made it so. The blood poured and poured from the bullet wound. I watched him as he struggled to avoid drowning in his own blood. As he gasped and spluttered, I held the gun up to his head. Was this for you, Alexandria? No. No, I could do nothing for you now. This is for me. I closed my eyes, readying myself for the final moment. But the sound of urgent knocking pulled me out of my delusion. I returned once again to my room and heard the sound of my mother yelling behind my door, asking me to let her in. Go away. She ignored me and opened the door. She looked in stunned silence at the state of my room. I don't know what expression I had on my face. I didn't want to know. but I know it must have been terrifying. She looked at me with a look of fear, like someone had replaced the son she knew so well. I knew my tantrum was childish, but what could I do? I was a child, a kid who in the midst of the greatest days of his life had to endure grief he wasn't ready for. I knew this rage, this attempt at fictional revenge wouldn't save me, wouldn't do anything for me. But what else was there for me? They say that time heals all wounds, but I wasn't willing to bank on such an uncertain remedy. In the time that had passed since Alexandria's death, my wounds had only grown bigger.
Nick, please, let's talk about this.
Go away.
Nick, please.
Go away.
Nick.
Go away. I howled at her. She wasn't getting the message. I grabbed a mark that my mother herself had given me and hurled it as hard as I could at the wall to the right of the door. The mark shattered, and my mom let out a yell of fear that ripped my heart out. I regretted what I had done immediately. She slammed the door, and I could hear her sobbing as she ran downstairs. I knew I would be facing my father next. I knew I had to apologize to my mother. I knew I had to apologize as soon as possible, beg for forgiveness like I had demanded of late, but I had to finish this first. I tried to bring myself back to the cliffside, but the image was dimmer. The noises were faded. Vlade's tortured form was barely recognizable anymore. I was hardly there. I raised the gun once more towards Vlade's face, but I couldn't even make out an expression. What was the point? I had known all along that this imagined revenge would bring me minutes of comfort at best. It wouldn't bring Alexandria back. The very next day, I would feel as horrible as I did today. Even if Vlade had survived and I had a real opportunity for revenge, I knew that shooting him, torturing him, and killing him would do nothing for me. I pulled the trigger and watched the prisoner of my delusion fall lifelessly to the ground. I fell down onto my bed, defeated. Was this the acceptance portion of grief? Was it accepting that this emptiness I felt would just be a part of my life now? That memories, consolations, and imagined revenge wouldn't be enough to fill what was missing in me? When Alexandria had died, a part of me had died with her that day. Who I once was is gone forever. There was a naivety, an idealism that was just as buried as Alexandria was. I thought about her. I thought about her. I missed her. I missed her so much. How could a girl I only knew for 2 months make me feel this way? What was wrong with me? Was I weak for feeling like I did? Or was I strong? It didn't matter. Weak or strong, I was stuck with these feelings. I loved her smile, her laugh, the way she teased me. I had said that I would love them even if they were meant for someone else. I meant that, but the thought of her not smiling, the thought of her not laughing, the thought of her not teasing someone. I couldn't live with that. I had loved her so much, I had wanted so badly for her to be happy. I could only hope that wherever she was now, she was happy. I'm sorry, Alexandria. When we meet again, I hope you deliver the punishment I deserve. I continued listening to my mother sob downstairs, and tears started welling up in my own eyes. I cried into my pillow and cried all through the night, thinking of how I had hurt those I cared for. I thought about Alexandria, how much I loved and missed her. I should have treasured the ability to do that, to cry over loved ones. It would be the last time I cried in 10 years. Setting sun end. What? Finished setting sun. Tragedy has struck. Oh. Was that the end of the 87 timeline? Or am I overreacting to the word end here? I do want to end it here for today, definitely. But interesting. Didn't cry for 10 years. So yeah, what I said earlier became all the more possible, that Victor is really Nick. I assume we will find out next time. But oh boy, yeah, that was a lot. Again, I kind of assumed that they would not get their happy end, Nick and Alexandria, I mean. But that was rough. Him actually finding her body, oof. And of course, the whole grief part. No matter how, how exactly the situation would have been if she's dead, that's horrible either way, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what much else to say. That was really, really rough, and I... Like, I can really get his reactions. I think that's all very normal to go to these kind of, stages of grief. And yeah, also we cannot forget he's a teenager. Like, grief is hard for everyone, but as a teenager, yeah. Phew, really, really rough. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it here for today. As always, I'd really appreciate if you'd let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.